Okay, so here topics that could be tested are conflicting and common aims of stakeholders, the market and competition. Okay, so on to our next question. Evaluate the extent of possible stakeholder conflicts affecting Ethical Foods Limited. Remember, stakeholders are individuals and organisations which have an interest in the success of the firm. We could use a spider diagram to help us here. You have a go at this one. Pause and identify the main stakeholders for Ethical Foods Limited and the main conflicts. Let's see if your spider diagram is similar to mine. So, there seems to be conflicts with Ethical Foods employees, especially between the new manager and John James, who is upset at late shift work. The bank have offered to lend Ethical Foods Limited £80,000 of the £100,000 required, which means Sue and Chris have to get alternative sources of finance and give up some of their shareholding. Competitors were muscling in on Ethical Foods market, which Chris and Sue did not seem too bothered about, until their supermarket orders were undercut. This could have caused conflict with the competitor, but there was little they could do. Let's look at customers. There was conflict when mixed up orders and late deliveries occurred, shown by the complaints. Also, when their major customer couldn't manage to pay £6,000, this would have caused conflict. Now, shareholders. Chris and Sue, as the main shareholders, seem to have few arguments and little conflict. However, they don't seem to be quite so eager to sell out to the supermarket as Shirley, the shareholder who invested £20,000 as her 5% stake, is now worth £150,000. Okay, now we've reviewed some of the issues, let's listen to a sample answer. Stakeholders are individuals and organisations which have an interest in the success of a business, such as employees, customers and shareholders. The main stakeholder conflict seems to be between the supermarket, the customer who has undercut Ethical Foods prices, and the shareholders. Sue and Chris have worked hard to build up the company and would not want to let their hard work be undone. They also have their employees to consider and would need to make sure their jobs are guaranteed if they sold to the supermarket. Shirley, however, would make £150,000 out of her £20,000 investment, and it appears that she is the main person really wanting Ethical Foods to sell now. There does seem to be other conflicts between the employees. The new manager has introduced new ways of working, which has upset John James particularly. He has a new child and is upset about the new late shifts. He has complained to such an extent that he has been disciplined. Also, John probably doesn't like the fact that an outsider has been promoted above him in a firm where he has been working from the beginning. There are conflicts within Ethical Foods, but these can be solved. The employee problem, although serious, may be resolved through discussing the situation with staff and finding solutions which would be appropriate for the firm and employees. The more serious conflict is about whether Ethical Foods should sell to the supermarket or not. If they decide to sell, employees will become a lot more concerned about their job security. Here's what our examiner said about this answer. The answer starts off by defining terms, applying points to the context of the case study, and then analysing the points. Again, there is a final evaluative paragraph. This is also good exam technique, and so it's a good answer. The last question we shall review is another evaluative question. Often, but not always, at the end of case studies, the main protagonists need to make a decision, and a question may be set asking you what the decision should be. In our case study, the decision is whether Ethical Foods should allow the supermarket to take them over. So, the question may be something along these lines.
Discuss the case for and against Ethical Foods Limited selling their business to the supermarket chain.
Pause and spend 5 minutes and plan an answer. So how did you get on? Let's have a look at a good sample answer. There are a number of reasons why Ethical Foods Limited should sell out to the supermarket chain. The main reason is financial. If Chris, Sue and Shirley do agree to accept £3 million, then Shirley will have £150,000, which provides a significant return on her £20,000 investment. The rest of the £2,850,000 would be split between Sue and Chris, which would make them both extremely wealthy, which is one of their main aims. Also, if they didn't sell, they would have to borrow more capital to be able to expand so they could gain the economies of scale to compete effectively with their main competition. This may be very risky. Lastly, there seems to be employee conflict at Ethical Foods Limited, and it may be a good time to let a different management team take over. However, Sue and Chris may not want to sell, as they have invested a lot of time and effort in their business idea, and if they took the risk to become larger, they may become very seriously wealthy. Also, they may feel they have some obligation to their employees to make sure their jobs are safe. Overall, it is probably wise for Ethical Foods to sell to the supermarket chain. They seem to be having more and more competition, and borrowing money may be risky and expensive. Added to this, there's no guarantee that their business will be successful in the future. Sue and Chris would become millionaires and would not have to deal with some of the internal problems of business. They also seem reasonable owners and would probably want guarantees about the job security for their employees. Hopefully, you've recognised that this is a good answer. There is no term to define in the question, but the points are applied to the case study, analysed and evaluated fully. We've talked about how to deal with a synoptic question, but for case studies, make sure you have a look at the bonus section.